Hello, my name is Peter Bryant, and I work for the U.S. Army in the Integrated Software and Visual Media team at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, Maryland. Um, I am a engineer by trade, but in the last couple of years, I've taken over a team of software writers and animators and graphics and such. Something I've done as a hobby for the longest time, and when the team needed someone to run it, they came to me because I've run a lot of projects and I'm good at managing people, and I do understand what they do. So I took over that team, and what our team does is we make videos, animations, training, applications. So like something you'd play on an iPhone or a tablet, and a lot of Android stuff. But we also we've made a few video games now, nothing like, nothing like an arcade video game, but video games for the Army. So to train folks how to use certain equipment or procedures, what they call concept of operations, so ConOps. We even made a board game. That was the first project I did with the team. A couple of years ago, there was one of our, we call them our customers. It's other military folks and other organizations that they want something done, and so they transfer money from their budget over to our budget, and then our people do the work for them. And so I was, of all the people in our area, I was probably the most qualified person, maybe even on the whole base, to make a board game. And this board game was to train folks how to do a mass decon event. So if you had a bunch of people who were contaminated either with like a chemical or biological or I guess radiation um, event, and you had say a couple hundred people that needed to be decontaminated before they went to a hospital, because you don't want people going into a hospital with agent or radioactive material on them. How do you set up a big outside camp to get people from contaminated to decontaminated and then to a hospital? And of course, a lot of these people probably have medical issues that they're going to have to be treated for, in addition to this deconning situation. And it's a very complex thing, setting up this. So you got to tent certain places, and you put your water places, and you put your deconning, anti-chemical agents and bacterial agents, and if you move something into what's called the hot line, so you have your contaminated zone. If you move stuff into the contaminated zone, you can't move it back out of the contaminated zone, and you have to, it's management resources. So it's kind of like all the things you would think of with a board game, with all these management resources and stuff, but in real life. So we did turn that into a board game, and it was actually very, very successful, and it helped with the promotion of a concept that I've been trying to get a lot of people in leadership to buy into, and they are because the studies are there, and it's a very real thing that uh, the way we learn in our early life is through gaming, and that's why kids are naturally playing games, and they're learning. They're learning these different things um, through gaming, and so. What they call retention, so like how long you remember something, and understanding, go way up when you gamify a thing. It's like our brains are built to learn that way. And so we've been kind of selling that idea to leadership, and there's a lot of documentation out there to support it. Um, so using gaming in a real world setting to help our we call them the warfighter, right? Because that could be a sailor or a soldier or pilot, whatever. Um, they're all collectively they're warfighters, but to train our warfighters how to get the job done and come home in one piece, which is kind of the goal. And specifically with chem bio, like where we work, it's really important because the decisions you make are life and death. There's very little room for error. Just touching the wrong thing could be the last thing you ever touch. So it's been a really good experience. going from an engineering standpoint where I used to actually design and build things to doing software for the things that are design build has been really beneficial because, when I'm building this training material, um, I have a real world application that I can apply it to, at least mentally. And, it's a career that has been growing over the last 10 years for me. 12 years. I started there 12 years ago. Prior to that, I was just in regular engineering world, doing regular engineering things. And, so it's been really awesome. And I'm going to talk a little more. I got some questions I got to answer for you guys. But I will wrap this talk up with a little bit of it, some of my, I don't know, my worldly advice on on a long career of both in gaming and then professional career, and then where those two things have been able to bring them together. Um, so my first question is tell us about your first experience with video games and my favorite. So I am 52 years old, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s. That's where my childhood was spent. So I grew up on things like Atari, and you guys probably don't remember, like, in television and Coleco and God, what were some of the other ones? But the old arcade machines. So you would go into an arcade and throw your quarters in there, and you'd play games. You play Pac-Man and Space Invaders and all these different games. And then you have your home consoles, and it was like these little 16 pixels on a screen. Um, those are my early games. I think, God, I can't even remember what the first video game. There's no way I can remember what the first video game I played was, but I do remember loving. There's this really kind of offbeat game that a lot of people probably haven't heard of called Gyrus, and Gyrus was sort of like a cross between Galaga and a game called Tempest. So in Tempest, you went around this tunnel and you shot these I don't know, the little pixels that came up, like little stars and little triangular shapes and stuff that would come up this thing, and you had to go around this tunnel and shoot them. And then Galaga was you were a ship on the bottom of the screen, and you go left and right, and you'd shoot these aliens as they'd come down. And then so Gyrus was you went around a circle and you shot ships. So literally, like, the combination of the two. That was one of my favorites. Another one was this game called Jungle Hunt, where you were like this Tarzan guy and you'd have to swing from vine to vine, and um, just so many good old games like that. But most of my experience was with either Atari or in television. Um, and then, well, there was a period where my friend John had gotten a Commodore 64, so we played a lot of the Commodore 64 games, so early computer games, and it was it's so funny how dated that stuff is, because you'd get this big 5.25-inch floppy disk, and you'd put it in, and you'd have to run that disk to load the game every time you played it. Like, it wasn't on your computer, it was on your disk, and you'd put the disk in, and you would load this thing up, and you you'd play the game, and if you pulled the disc out, it would stop working. So we did a lot of that, a lot of late nights, playing with the Commodore 64 and listening to, like, Beatles or something like that. But my favorite game of all time, I think, was a game called Tribes. Now, Tribes was one of the very early first-person shooter networking games, sort of like Quake, or what are some of the other ones? Like, I guess you guys would be playing. What's that game? You drop down into the thing in the island and it shrinks. You're probably screaming at me right now with the name of it. One of my friends plays it. I've never really played it, but at any rate, you're trying to go around and kill each other. And Tribes was one of the very early ones to do this, and it was really cool because you each had a base, and you would defend your base, right? But then you'd also try and go out and attack their base. So you could set up defenses, and you had to, like, try and sneak around the radar and stuff. It was very dynamic, really, really cool game. And honestly, I think it probably didn't go very far. It didn't last very long in the market because it really was one of the very first multiplayer games where it really wasn't any good by yourself. You had to play it with other people on a network, and the system, the infrastructure for that just wasn't set up for it yet, like the way it is today. Like everybody's on the internet today. Back then, you still had people who like had really crappy internet connections, if they had internet at all. So um, it was just something that not everybody had, you know. And it wasn't a console game; it was a PC only game. So there was a lot of barriers to entry to play this game, but it was really cool, and I think it still holds up. I haven't played it in a long time, but that would have to be my favorite. And I like first person shooters. So for me, if I'm gonna play a game, I pretty much either want to play a first person shooter or something like Tekken or Mortal Kombat or something like that. I love the karate fighting games. Uh, um, yeah, so Tekken is my favorite of the fighting games. So next question is, tell us about your experience doing podcasts and video shows. So what was it? 12, 13, about 13 years ago, I started doing podcasting. And the first podcast I did was for a tabletop role playing game. And so we ran with that for about 6 years, I want to say. And then I branched out with another podcast for a short period of time where I went to conventions and I interviewed people at conventions and stuff. And that was unsustainable because I had to go to too many conventions. And I didn't have the money to go to conventions all the time. And then part and then we started this one called the Mythwits, which was sort of like a geek podcast. It was in an interview show. We would interview people and we would talk about science and gaming and all that sort of thing. So I'm back now. I had to go get a drink of water. My throat was getting really harsh. So yeah, we ran the Mythwits and it was a fun show, and it just wasn't hitting the demographic that I wanted to hit. And that's one of the things that I think I find that a lot of people have an issue recognizing. It's you want to do a thing and you think it's great and you're very creative and you put a lot of time and energy into it, and a lot of times this stuff is hit or miss. You don't know what people are going to buy into and what they're not going to buy into. So I think when you're doing things like video game work or any kind of gaming design, you can take a guess at what people are going to like, and some people are better at it than others. Sometimes you just get lucky, and the big people, the successful people that you see are generally people who were lucky in a lot of ways. I'm not saying luck is everything because you do have to work hard to do a thing. But there's a lot of people working hard. The ones you see are the ones that worked hard and got lucky. You don't see all the people who failed. So at any rate, we did the show for a while and it was fun, but I decided to call it quits because I just wasn't getting out of it what I was putting into it. It was one of those things where I knew it was time to quit, so we did. And Mythwits was different in that I'd done podcasts before, which is audio only, which is much easier to do than video. We did a live video show, and when we did this, it was back in the days when we first started. It was back in the days before YouTube had a live function, which they don't have. Well, they do have it, but you can't like bring in multiple people. But they didn't have anything. They had no way of streaming live. You had to like record your videos and upload them. So we were on something called Justin TV, there was Justin and Twitch, and they were owned by the same folks. And then Justin went away. So then we had a Twitch channel for like 5 minutes, and then the YouTube had this thing called YouTube Live. So we jumped on that. We did that for a while. And then we went back to Twitch, but that didn't work out too well. That was at the time, it was still before Twitch was doing gaming type stuff. Well, not gaming. I'm sorry. They were doing gaming. They weren't doing like the kind of gaming stuff that we were doing. It was all video games. They weren't doing like board games, and they weren't doing like role playing games, and it didn't attract that crowd, which is kind of was more of our audience. So Twitch didn't work out so good. So we did Facebook Live, and that actually worked out really well for us. So sometimes you have to jump around and find where your niche is and where your content is going to be absorbed by people, where people are going to come to see it. It's not always what you put out. Sometimes it's where you put it out, but yeah, podcasting was fun. The video show was fun. It's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than you'd ever think it would be. I think anything where you're making something always tends to be more work than you think it'll be. And where it's fun, you do enough of it and it stops being fun. It goes from being this really fun thing you did to all this work that you do. And sometimes you can keep it fun, but I don't know. I interviewed a lot of people, a lot of creatives, and some of the people were some named people. And they told me it was a consistent thing that they would spend probably 10% of their time doing the actual fun, creative stuff, and 90% of their time was spent doing other things. You have a show that you do, or you're a presenter of some kind. You're going to spend all this time on all the behind the scenes stuff that nobody ever sees, answering emails and doing billing and all these things. There's so many things technical, and especially if you're, one or two people doing it, it's just so much work. Which is, it's fine if you don't mind doing that stuff. But yeah, that was a learning experience for me. Question 3, how do you think video game technology can be or is applied to other career fields? Well, that is right up my alley. So that's what we do. We make video games with some of the latest technology. So we do some VR work, we do some AR work, so virtual reality and augmented reality. And if you don't, I'm sure you all know the difference, but just in case there's anybody out there who doesn't, virtual reality is where you create the whole world and you insert yourself in it. So you put on goggles and all you see is the world that has been generated within the environment. And I don't know if very many people, I don't know how many of y'all realize this, but a VR headset is really just a monitor and a mouse kind of squished together. So, it's a monitor because it's projecting everything you see. And then it's also a mouse because as you move it, you see things. So we do a lot of VR work. We've done quite a bit of that. We have a project right now where we're doing a training facility, and it's the customer, which is the Department of Homeland Security, wanted us to create this. It's a training facility for chem bio decontamination. And they create these different rooms for people to go into with different environments. So one's like a nightclub, and one's like a hollowed out, like a abandoned building. There's one that's an area. It's a big, long, giant hallway that's got supposed to be like a street, like a street in downtown Kentucky, with shop faces and stuff on it. There's an area where there's like a fire engine where the people can walk through and they get hosed down to wash off the agent and stuff off of them. But this is a real physical facility, and what we're doing is we're putting vinyl on the walls to make it look like this. It's what they call full immersion. So immersing you in this environment in real life. It's not a perfect replica, but it's enough to like get you in that mindset. So where virtual reality comes in with that is that we've actually designed the whole thing in virtual reality so that the end user who is down in Anniston, which is that Alabama? I can't remember. It's somewhere down there. But we're sending them this material and they're putting the thing on and they're walking around in this facility that we've designed in virtual space so that they can give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, whether they like certain things, or they can tell us to change this or change that. Because once we print the vinyl, it's gonna be like, I don't know, $100,000 worth of vinyl that's going to go up on the walls, and you want to find all the mistakes now instead of later. And it's also good for like reviews and stuff. But we've also done other virtual environments, like what they call these sensitive site assessments, which is, imagine you are in somewhere, let's say you're in Iraq, and you come across a facility where they're making a chemical or biological agent. How do you train people how to recognize those things and what to do about it when they go into one? Well, you don't really want to put people in chem or bio type situations. And they do make mock-ups of rooms where they actually build the physical facility, which is a mock-up of it. And they put the people in the gear and they go in and they do their exercise. But it's in a lot of ways, it's better to send them in virtually within a VR environment, because you don't have to build these facilities. You can swap them out quickly. So you can have one facility or another facility, depending on which one you pull up into your virtual environment, just like a video game. And you don't have to use these things called simulants. So you don't want to actually expose them to a certain chemical, but you want a meter to pick it up so that they can, a detector to pick it up so that they can take a reading and go through the exercise. Well, in the virtual world, you just tell it that it's a thing. But with the simulants, you have to procure all this, the simulants. Sometimes they're not cheap. So it's a cost savings type of thing. And we're also pushing the boundaries of training for people virtually and overseas in areas that have a high turnover rate. So that if you're, say, in Korea, there's a high turnover rate there where you might only be on the base for 9 months before you transfer out. So you get there, you get trained on the equipment, and they have to fly trainers out to train you, right? So they come out and they're out there for like 2 weeks and they're away from their families. And then, 9 months later, out you go. And you might go before your replacement comes in. So then they got to send trainers back out there again. And we're working with them currently to provide them with a training solution that is virtual, where they can put on a headset and learn how to use this equipment, and maybe even bring in people from the States, within the computer environment. So I'd put one on, I'd be here in on the East Coast, and I'd put one on, and you'd be in Korea, maybe even have a whole squad of people there, and they put them on. And then I'm the trainer, and I would train you how to use this thing in this virtual space. And we're all kind of in the room together, but, we're countries apart. So that's the kind of stuff that that we're using gamification for in other places. Another thing that we used augmented reality to do engineering designs. So we would design a product, a prototype of it, and then you could put on like a HoloLens, augmented reality. I should say augmented reality is when you take your reality, so everything that you can see in real life, and you have like a lens that you're looking through, so you're actually seeing it, but then on that lens is projected your augmented models or whatever it is you're trying to show in that space. A good example of this is Pokemon Go. So you look at your phone, and you can see a Pokemon, on the floor in front of you. So that's a type of augmented reality. You don't need to use goggles for it. You can use your smart devices, and doesn't have to be a game. It could be anything. It could be an instruction manual. It could be directions to a place. I have an app on my phone which is augmented reality, which I can hold it up. Like I want to see all the pizza places near me, and actually I can hold it up and look around, and it will show me like an arrow on it and how far away it is in that direction. So it's pretty cool use of technology. But that all comes from, a lot of that stuff comes from the gaming industry. It starts with gaming, but there are other places to use it. For example, again, the Army, we're using it for training, but we could also use it for operational stuff because there's been discussions of using it real time. Soldiers go into the field. There's a whole program called IVAS, which is using a modified version of the HoloLens for field use so that, it's a lot like it's like a video game. You pick up your gun and you're pointing it at somebody, and your reticle appears in your vision with a little ammo counter down at the bottom, and maybe a map, and maybe a little video telling you, with instructions of what you need to be doing. So it's almost like real life, like real life video game stuff. It's still a little ways off. The IVAS is under development. It's going to be, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years before it's like really, really like in place. But we're already fooling around with that stuff. I saw a video of a soldier with a gun, and the gun had a camera on it, and he was pointing it around the corner and looking through his IVAS, looking at a video of what his gun was seeing, so he could actually shoot around corners. Pretty cool stuff. Flying drones. You could fly a drone and have a video display in your field of view. So you wouldn't need to have like a little controller or whatever. You could control it through your augmented reality with hand gestures. I don't know, really, really cool stuff. I've also seen a group of people using virtual reality to train how to repair things. There was a wind turbine. So this was the example that I did, but there was a wind turbine, and you put on the virtual goggles and you go into this wind turbine, and you go up this elevator, and you go into the turbine, and you're like way up in the air, and you can look over the edge. It's creepy, right? And it shows you how to change filters and put out a fire that might be in there. And I still remember that like it was yesterday. And this was over 2 years ago, before the pandemic. And so the retention is there. Like I could probably change the filter in that thing, and I did it one time. So game technology is going to be everywhere, and it's growing, and part of my job is researching this stuff and advising other Army folks, and well, across like joint programs, so Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, advising them on where to go with this technology, and where it should be applied and where it shouldn't, because it's virtual reality and augmented reality is not for everything. It's not the answer to everything. It's one tool in the toolbox. Again, like I said, we had a board game that we train people with. It's whatever tools is the most appropriate for whatever situation. But it has application everywhere, and it's going to be more and more and more and more. There is going to be a day not too far off where augmented reality will be in a pair of glasses like this, something like this, or similar, right? Maybe a little more beefy. I don't know, or maybe it'll hook into your phone. I'm not totally sure what the form factor is going to be, but it's going to be a part of your life as much as a smartphone is. You're going to use it so much, you're not even going to know what life was like before you had it, because instead of looking at a map on your phone, you're going to pull this thing up, and it's literally going to put arrows on the ground or arrows in the air pointing down. You're going to walk outside of restaurants, and the menu is going to be glowing on a window. It's not far off. It's coming. And as soon as you have it, you'll wonder what it was like before you had it. You'll wonder what life was like before you had it. So, that's where this is going. So if you're looking to get into a career in gaming, you can't lose with going with AR or VR type training. And I really think that's where video games are going. I think, which leads to the next question: where do you think the future of video game technology is? I think people just playing on their consoles is going to be, I don't know. I guess it'll still be around, but like I have an Oculus, and it's amazing. I love it. I love playing on the Oculus, and honestly, the form factor for that right now is still a little clunky. But I see, the size of the things coming down, the resolution getting better, the freedom of motion getting better. I see a day where, Ready Player One is like reality, but even better than, maybe not, well, maybe not the end result being better than Ready Player One, because that was kind of pie in the sky. I don't think, I don't know that you're going to be playing games the way that they're playing them, where you're going to be so immersed into it. But I see the form factor of the headsets and maybe motion tracking and hand gestures and all that kind of stuff getting better and better and better. And we're gonna we're gonna come across some kind of advance in the next 10 years that we didn't foresee. Nothing I can predict at this moment of what's going to make that better and how that's going to be cooler. How are we going to get it to glasses, right? That's not something we could do today, but I know it's in a lot of people's radar to try and get it there. Apple was talking about like having that by now, but they haven't gotten there. But that's where I see video games going. I think it's going to be a lot more AR and VR type games. I can just imagine having an augmented reality game where you're walking through your house and your house becomes the level of a dungeon or a haunted house or something like that, and you're just playing the game in like real life, or you're running around outside doing stuff. And not only that, playing with other people. I see meetings coming up in AR where you could just, you put on your glasses and you start a meeting and it's like you're sitting at a table with a bunch of people. The pandemic has made us much more virtual. I used to go in the office every day. Now I work from home every day. And there's really no rush for me to go back to the office because I do just as much work at home as I would do at work, and we all collaborate. So I think gaming is going to fall under the same kind of thing. It's just going to be more and more and more of the virtual world. I don't think Facebook's going to crack it with the Meta. I don't think Meta's going to be the way it goes. I think I don't know. It hasn't taken off. And with a technology like that and a push like that, and that company, it should have happened by now. And since it hasn't, I don't know. Maybe I could be wrong, but I just they had the momentum, and it seems to be kind of. So I don't know. I don't see them making it. I don't think it's going to take over. I think it's going to be something else. Favorite technology project. What is my favorite technology project? All right. There is a thing that I'm doing with the Army right now, and it's something that I'm trying to make happen. It's something I can talk about too, because it's all like modern technology. It's nothing like crazy. I mean, it's cool. There is the virtual, like you'd wear your virtual headset, and they have this body puck system that you put one on the back of each hand. I think one goes on your bicep. There's one that goes in the middle of your back, and then one on each leg and one on each foot. And then your headset is the one on your head. And what it does is it translates the coordinates of all these different body parts, and then it builds your skeleton inside the system. So what it does is it allows you to be full body inside of a VR environment. So it's not just your headset. It knows where your feet are and where your hands are. They also have these gloves that track the movement of your hands. So if you do this, your avatar does that. So it's not like you're holding pucks or like holding those hand things with the rings on them. You're actually just using your hands, right? So if you point your hand, you could get bang, 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 right? So I think that is one of my favorite things right now, because if I'm doing that and you're doing that, and somebody in Korea is doing that, or wherever they are, Libya, or wherever country they're in, we can all play together. We can hand each other stuff in the game. I watched a demo where a couple of people were wearing these, and you could see what the virtual world looked like and what they were seeing. And they were kicking a ball around in a room together. It was really amazing. That is my favorite piece of technology right now. My least favorite technology, social media. No, no. My least favorite technology is, I don't know. I don't really have a least favorite. I will say that HoloLens is really cool, but it's not there yet. It's still very clunky. Um, the Army's working with IVAS, but it's not going to be the end all be all. It needs like two or three more form factors. So there was HoloLens 1, which came out several years ago. HoloLens 2 just came out in the last like year or two. And then, I'm thinking maybe 3, maybe 4 before it's everywhere. Matter of fact, it's probably going to be 4. So 3 will probably be another industry tool or just getting into the home, but it'll be the entry level in the home, because no one in their homes have HoloLens 2 right now. Not yet. Not really. It's more of like it's still in its beta. It's mostly companies that have it, and folks like us who are developing with it. It's trying to prove out the technology. So right now, augmented reality is just like as a headset that you wear is just not there yet. Um, Augmented reality right now is great for like things like iPhones and tablets and such. Or if you have an Android, if you're an Android fan, whatever, same thing. Um, so that's where I am with the technology right now. And that's it. That's it for my questions. But I do want to wrap this up with, I know you all. I know there's a lot of young folks, and you're looking to start your life soon. You're going to school, and you're going to be going into a career at some point soon. And this is talking about video games and that sort of thing. Um, the video game market, to work in video games, is very competitive. The people I work with now, I've never worked in that market myself, but all the people I work with are pretty much have either aspired to work in that market or have worked in that market. And everything that I've learned from them is pretty much the same. They all say the same thing. It's competitive. You have to work crazy hours. They have like pool tables and foosball machines, and of course, obviously, video game machines, and they'll give you free coffee, and they have cafeterias, and all the food's free, and they have couches, and all this great stuff. But you need all that stuff because they expect you to be there all the time. You might work 18 hours a day trying to crank a game out. The pay is pretty good. It can be. It can be kind of crappy, but it can be really good. I know some of the developers are making 6 figures, and like in the high 6 figures, or at least the high first 6 figures. So like $180,000 a year is not like a crazy salary to achieve to, and I mean, that obviously that would be like something with some experience and some management and stuff like that. But you're talking about somebody in their early 30s making that kind of money, maybe even younger if you're really talented and you get with the right company. But it comes at a price. If you're getting paid that, you're there all the time and you're stressed, and there's very little job security. So they might do a game, you might work on a game for 2 years for them, and then that's it. The company goes under, or they fire everybody because that game is out. Now they don't need you anymore. I have a friend who worked in the game industry. I guess he still does. I haven't seen him in a while because he got fired from one company. Now, when I say fired, it wasn't because he did anything wrong. It was because they just didn't need him anymore because his game was either made, or I think he actually worked for one of the companies that went under when I first met him. And so he had to move to the West Coast, and then he had to move to Canada because, same kind of situation. And then I think he went somewhere else, and I think he's back on the East Coast again. It's hard to keep up, but he's had to move around the country to stay in the video game industry. And it's been very volatile. But, there are tangential things that you can do. Like, for example, I'll just talk about what we do. There's plenty of places in the government, and it's growing. There's a website called usajobs.gov, and you can check that out for all kinds of stuff. There's down in is it Texas? I think it's Texas, is Army Game Studios. And they developed this thing called America's Army, which was a first-person shooter, but it was, it was all based around all the Army stuff, and it had, all the right equipment, and they actually used it to train, simulate combat, and so that that's a place that you could work. But there's also like our group, and there's lots of groups around, that do a lot of like use that kind of technology for the warfighter. So and it doesn't even have to be just for the warfighter. It could be for training of any kind. But all kinds of training is going that way. Manuals are becoming electronic, what they call IEDMs, which are electronic training manuals, which involve things like videos and audio, and hell, they're getting into augmented reality now with training manuals. But you want to make sure you keep your options open, and be careful of the video game industry, in that it's a tough life, or it can be. I don't want to dissuade you from going to that, because it could be a great life for you. I just want to make sure that there are other options and there are things you can do. One of the guys that works for me, Tom, worked in the game industry for years and years, and he came to work for us, and he's like, this is so much better now. He's like, when I was younger, that was great, but now that I'm getting older, he's like, I need some kind of security, because I don't want to have to move every time a job ends, or be worried that if I don't work 60, 70 hours a week, I'm not going to have a job. But anyway, that's pretty much all I got. And I'd like to thank you for watching this and taking the time. And good luck with everything. And it can be a very rewarding career. And even if you don't do it as a career and it's a hobby, it's a great hobby as well. So that's it. Thank you.